911.
In an emergency, you may have to try to save the life of someone you love. I'm William Shatner. Tonight, true stories of men, women, and children with the courage and willingness to get involved on Rescue 911. We begin in Palm Desert, California, almost 3 years to the day after David Cresson sustained a severe head injury in a near-fatal car crash.
Kimberly has picked up David's handicap very well. She's like his second mind, and she never turns that off. They have this special relationship that she's her dad's shadow when I'm not here.
Watch your step. When we go for walks, I usually tell him when he's cold, so I tell him if we're lost, I tell him how to get home.
On the afternoon of October 17th, 1990, David had picked up his 5-year-old daughter, Kimberly, from the bus stop and was looking after her.
My dad was washing the dishes, and I was cuddling. Daddy, can I have a drink of water? Daddy? Can I have some water? Daddy, what's wrong? When I saw my daddy, I was real scared, so I called 911.
The call came in to Riverside County Dispatcher Dan Klein.
Emergency.
My dad just fell down on the tile.
What?
My dad just fell down on the tile.
Your dad fell down?
Yeah, on the tile.
Is he hurt?
I don't know.
Okay, can your daddy talk to you?
No.
He can't? Did he ask you to call for help?
No.
I recognized immediately it was a young child, and I could hear the emotion in it. She was on the verge of tears. I felt right away that this was a serious call.
Okay, are you all by yourself?
Yes.
What's your name?
Kimberly Grayson.
Kimberly?
Uh-huh.
Okay, Kimberly, we're going to send you help right away, okay?
Uh-huh.
Now, I want you to stay on the phone with me, all right?
Uh-huh.
All right. How old are you, Kimberly?
5.
You're 5?
I got a babysitter. She just lives around the corner.
But the babysitter's not with you?
No.
She's only 5 years old. She was alone. I guess her whole world had crashed down on her right then, and there was nobody to turn to except the telephone.
When we continue.
It was one of those unique calls that tells you that you may not be able to save this patient.
He's just sleeping there.
It had been less than 2 minutes since 911 dispatcher Dan Klein had received a call from a distraught 5-year-old Kimberly Cresson, reporting that her dad was hurt.
We had very little to go by. All we were able to get at that point of time from the little girl was that her father collapsed, and she did not know what was wrong with him. It was one of those unique calls where you get this sixth sense that tells you that you may not be able to save this patient.
Well, we're sending you help. Is there any blood coming from your daddy's head?
No.
But he's not, but he's sleeping?
Yeah.
He's just sleeping there.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Can you see your daddy right now?
Yeah.
And he's still laying there?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Can you tell me, is he laying on his back?
Yes.
And he's looking up at the roof?
No. He's wiggling his head.
He's wiggling his head?
Uh-huh.
Are his eyes open?
Let me go see.
Okay.
The very first impression I had was that it was a heart attack, and my questions to Kimberly were directed at trying to establish the father's level of consciousness.
Yes.
His eyes are open?
Uh-huh.
Okay, I want you to tell him that the fire department is coming to help.
Wait, but he won't talk back. Bubbles are coming out of his mouth.
Something's coming out of his mouth?
No, bubbles are.
Bubbles are?
Uh-huh.
Her description gave me almost a photograph of what was taking place when she told me that his stomach was wiggling and that there were bubbles coming out of his mouth. That certainly isn't a sign of normal breathing. So I knew based upon that we had a serious problem at that point.
Can you just tell him in his ear, say, Daddy, the firemen are coming to help?
Uh-huh.
And he'll hear you, but he may not be able to talk.
All right.
Go tell him that.
All right.
When you...
Your stomach's wiggling.
That's good. We're happy about that. He must have just hurt his head really bad. Okay. Is there anybody else there with you now? I thought I could hear another voice. Nope. What's that, honey? Okay, Kimberly, do you have somebody that lives next door to you?
Yes.
Do you think it... Kimberly, come on, listen to me now. Listen to me. I'm going to help you, okay? Now, is there somebody living next door that you can go and tell?
Yes.
Why don't you do that? And then come back and talk to me on the phone.
Wait.
Okay, run next door and get help.
Wait, but what do I say to him?
Tell him your daddy is hurt.
Wait.
And the fireman is on the phone, and he wants to talk to you, to somebody else.
Wait.
And I'll stay on the phone.
I asked Kimberly to go outside because it gives her something to do. If Kimberly were hysterical and out of control, and if her father could sense that or could hear it, then that would perhaps affect his condition.
Fire department EMTs arrived on the scene within 5 minutes.
He's on the tile floor. He's bleeding. Is he gonna feel?
Dispatcher Dan Klein had stayed on the line until he knew help was there.
Okay, well, you guys got it now. Later, maybe. I'll call you later then, maybe. Bye.
I have a 5-year-old, and the thoughts going through my mind at the time was that it would be the worst moment of their little life. And that's what I felt Kimberly was going through, perhaps the worst moment of her life.
The ambulance with paramedics John Nelson and Gad Smith arrived less than a minute later.
As soon as we got to the scene, we found our engineer informing us that they have a very critical patient lying on the floor. He was not breathing at the time, and he appeared to have been going through a severe seizure activity. Even for us as paramedics, it's a very traumatic experience to visualize. It's something that tells you that you are dealing with a victim that is in dire need of immediate intervention.
Hi, what's your name? Kimberly, I want you to step back over here, okay?
We try to find out where her mom worked. Perhaps the mother could give us some valuable medical information about this man's condition.
Kimberly told John how to reach her mother.
I always thought that I would never, ever forgive myself if anything happened to either one of them. So when he called me and I heard Kimberly crying in the background and he said that there had been an accident, I was really scared.
Barbara, listen, I need to know what medications your husband takes.
She was actually really hysterical, but she relayed to us that he had a medical history of having an anomaly of the brain that was causing him to seize.
Once an individual starts having some kind of a bleeding or an aneurysm that might have ruptured in his brain, the clock is ticking. Time is against our side.
On the way home, I was really scared. The neurosurgeon had told me that if he ever hit his head hard, that he would not survive.
1, 2, 3, 4. All right, go ahead, get on my way.
We gave him medication to try to stop the seizure, but he wasn't responding to it. And rapid transport was definitely in order, but we had a little girl to deal with, too. We couldn't leave the little girl at home.
Kimberly, listen, I want you to come in here with me, okay? And I want you to sit in this chair.
Okay.
Get him over. Try and pull it out
Just a little bit, okay.
I ran in the house and we just kind of hugged each other, and Kimberly said, "Mommy, I don't want my daddy to die. I did the best I could."
We had problems maintaining his airway, and he wasn't responding to our drugs. He needed the drugs that a hospital could give. That's when we realized that, we got to get this guy hooking and booking.
At this point, if you didn't give the dime, has been circulating out approximately 1.5 minutes.
They wheeled David by me, and I just remember it was just a horrible flashback of walking into the hospital and seeing him the same way that I did 3 years ago. And I just remember looking at him thinking, I'm not going to live through this again. I can't.
When he arrived to the hospital, he was completely unresponsive, and it wasn't clear whether or not it was just a seizure or some other reason for which he was not responding.
I talked to the neurologist that night, and he explained to me that he had just suffered a grand mal seizure and that he was unconscious, but the vital signs were good.
David Cresson was placed on a new medication to control his seizures and was released from the hospital after 4 days.
Ready?
My relationship with Kimberly is a very special relationship. We take care of each other. And that phone call that she made saved my life that day. I have heard the tape of Dan Klein and my daughter, and I was so impressed. My eyes began to water, and tears rolled.
After the accident, Kimberly Crescent wrote a thank you note to dispatcher Dan Klein. 2 months later, she finally got to meet him and his family.
It's very rare to hear from anybody about an incident or a call that we've been involved in. So when Kimberly's mother, Barbara, called, I was very excited.
Hi, how are you?
She thanked me for my help with Kimberly on the phone. And that really hit me hard and made me feel very proud for what I was involved in.
Since I was not home when this incident happened, I just felt that need to thank somebody from the bottom of my heart.
You're welcome. That's my job.
Dan asked Kimberly how she knew who to call for help.
It was then that I learned that Kimberly had a telephone cutout that she made in preschool. And this phone was made to teach the children how to call 911. Could you tell me again what buttons you pushed?
When I brought it home, my mommy and I practiced and practiced and practiced because Daddy was coming home from the hospital, and I wanted to know whenever he was an emergency and my mom wasn't home, I could just call 911. Thanks for helping me and my daddy.
You're welcome. I was very happy to do that. I think it's very important for the general public to teach all their children how to use the 911 system. If every child knew how to do that, then I think our society would be a lot better off for it.
Tickle her under where I always tickle you. No, remember where do I always tickle you and you giggle? Yes, look at that.
I'm really happy that my daddy's alive because I think I saved him.
Next.
I decided I would go ahead and start the car and turn on the air conditioner so that she would be cool in the car.